All right, let's talk about something we've all been through, assessment. But for a minute, I want you to forget the stress, forget the grades, forget the late night cram sessions. We're going to reframe assessment, not as this final, scary judgment, but as a super powerful and active part of the learning process itself.
You know, when you think back on school, your whole experience can feel boiled down to these three words, right? Tests, quizzes, grades. They always felt like the finish line, the final verdict on what you knew. But what if that's just a tiny piece of the puzzle? What if these things are meant to be more than just a yardstick? That's the big question we're going to dig into today. So let's try a totally different way of thinking about this. Instead of a finish line, imagine learning is a journey. And, any good journey needs a few things. It needs a map to show you where you're starting, a compass to guide you along the way, and some milestones to show you how far you've come. We're about to see how different kinds of assessment are actually those exact tools. To really get this, we first have to wrap our heads around a massive shift that's happened in the world of education. The whole point of assessment, its fundamental purpose, has totally evolved. It's not just about that final letter grade anymore. And this right here is the absolute key. On the left, you've got assessment of learning. This is the classic model. Think of a final exam. It's all about judging what you've learned. It answers one question: how well did you do? But now look at the right, assessment for learning. This is a total game changer. This is about using assessment during the process to give feedback. It answers a completely different and way more powerful question: how can you do better? The whole focus shifts from judgment to improvement. Okay, so every great journey has to start somewhere. And the first step is always figuring out exactly where you are on the map. In learning, that means finding out what you already know, maybe what you think you know but don't, and where you're trying to go. This first step is so important, but it's often overlooked. And that's where something called diagnostic assessment comes in. Its only job is to get a picture of what a student knows and can do right at the beginning. This isn't for a grade, it's just about gathering intel. It's like a teacher creating a personalized roadmap for every single student, seeing their strengths and potential roadblocks right from day one. So what does this actually look like? Well, it can be a bunch of different things. Maybe a quick, low-stakes pretest that shows common misconceptions before you even start a new topic. Or a self-assessment where you reflect on your own confidence with certain skills. Even just a simple survey or a quick chat can give an instructor so much insight to help tailor the journey ahead. It's all about drawing that initial map. All right, so we've got our starting point, we're on the road. But you know how it is, journeys have twists, turns, maybe a few wrong turns. So how do we stay on track? Well, this is where the real-time guidance system kicks in, our own educational GPS. And that GPS is called formative assessment. Its whole purpose is to constantly check in on progress. And the feedback it gives, well, it's not just for the student. It's just as important for the teacher. It lets them know, hey, maybe we need to slow down here, or let's try explaining this a different way. It's like a continuous conversation between teaching and learning. This quote really hits the nail on the head. An assessment is only truly formative if the information you get from it is actually used to change what happens next. Think about it. If you get feedback but nothing changes, it's just information. But if that feedback helps shape the very next step in your learning, that's when it becomes formative. And this stuff is happening all the time in a great classroom. Formative assessment isn't some big formal test. It's woven into the everyday process. A quick exit slip at the end of class, that's a snapshot of understanding. Turning in a draft of an essay for feedback, that's a perfect formative moment. Even a simple think, pair, share activity is a way of checking in on the journey. Okay, so this brings up a really common question, a point where people can get a little mixed up. If these tasks are all about feedback and getting better, does that mean they can't have a grade on them? And the answer is yes, they absolutely can have grades. The key thing to remember, again, isn't the grade itself, it's the purpose. If you get graded homework back with comments that help you study for the big final exam, then that homework served a formative purpose. You always have to ask, is this tool being used to give a final judgment, or is it being used to help improve the learning that's still happening? So we've figured out our starting point, we've used our GPS to stay on course, and now it's time to get to the destination. This is that moment where you can stop, look back from the mountaintop, and see just how far you've come. And this final stop on the journey is called summative assessment. This is what most of us think of when we hear the word test. It happens at the end of a learning period, and its goal is to evaluate what's been learned. It's meant to certify that learning, to say, yep, you've mastered this stuff to a certain standard. It's the grand summary of the whole trip.
And these are the big milestones, right? The final exams, the huge capstone projects, a portfolio of all your best work from a semester. They're designed to be comprehensive, to ask you to pull everything you've learned together. They are all about answering that one big question. How well did you achieve the goals of this journey?
But here's the coolest part. This journey isn't just a straight line that starts and then stops. It's not over. These 3 stages, diagnostic, formative, and summative, are actually part of a powerful, continuous cycle that keeps improving itself. Just look at how beautifully this flows. You start with a diagnostic check. Where are we? You use formative checks to guide the journey. How are we doing? You use a summative assessment at the end. How far did we come? And then, and this is the absolute key, the results from that summative assessment become the diagnostic information for the next journey. The end of one trip is the start of the next one. It's this amazing integrated system for constant growth. Now, to make this whole process even more effective, you have to match the right tool to the right job. You wouldn't use a hammer to saw a board, right? Same idea here. If you just want to see if a student can remember a fact, a multiple choice test works great. But if you want to see if they can create something totally new, you're going to need a different kind of assessment, like a big research project. Aligning the task with the thinking skill is absolutely crucial. So, when you put it all together, here's the main takeaway. When it's designed with care, the whole system of assessment, from that very first survey to the final project, isn't just a test. It becomes an active, essential part of the learning. It's not something that's done to a student, it's something you do with them to actually build their knowledge, not just measure it after the fact. And that really brings us to the final big idea to chew on. We've seen that the way we assess students actually shapes what they learn and how they learn it. So that leads us with a really important question. If we know that's true, how can we start designing assessments that build the kinds of learners our future really needs? People who are creative, who can collaborate, and who are critical thinkers. That's the challenge for all of us. Thanks so much for watching.